State, Oregon. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. That's the aim. That's the goal. That's the mission right here at the Voice of College Football. Please help us make it happen by subscribing to the channel. Hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live and when we drop new content like this gem right here. It is becoming quickly the debate of the college football playoff race in 2021. Ohio State versus Oregon. And we are going to size it up right here at the Voice of College Football. The Ohio State debate, the argument for the Buckeyes goes like this. Most people believe them to be the best team. Let's just start simply with that. Most people just flat out believe they're the best team, even though the two teams played this season, and we will get to that game in just a second. The Buckeyes started out this season as one of the 4 or 5 highly rated teams in the country. They, of course, in week 2, lost to Oregon. That is the blemish on the record. The blemish on the performance was a lackluster performance against Tulsa the next week, in which they only led by a touchdown midway through the fourth quarter. Also, depending on your perspective, the Minnesota game, in which they did not take control of the game until early fourth quarter, but won by 2 touchdowns against a Minnesota team that continues to improve at least its resume as well at 5-2. So that to date is Ohio State's best win on its schedule. So if you go by the resume, the resumes are murky and muddled and not necessarily able to be distinguished between Ohio State and Oregon right now. But let's make one assumption, because it's the obvious assumption to make if we have any argument at all. Otherwise, this argument is null and void. That assumption is both Oregon and Ohio State run the table through the rest of the season, win the conference championship, and finish 12-1. So we've got 12-1 conference champion Ohio State versus 12-1 Pac-12 champ Oregon. So that's the assumption. So the Ohio State resume not necessarily better right now than Oregon in terms of the opponents defeated. The impressive nature of the wins is more weighty and valuable on the Buckeyes side than Oregon right now. But we have to make that assumption. As a 12-1 conference champion, Ohio State's resume is far better than Oregon's. It's not even close. So the case for the Buckeyes to date, a win over Minnesota by 2 touchdowns and dominant performances the last 2 weeks. Rutgers is not a good football team. They got off to a good start at 3-0. They played Michigan well. They have been deteriorating each and every week since. But the Buckeyes annihilated a capable Power 5 team, a team that's going to win 4 or 5 games this year, possibly get to a bowl game, possibly. So Rutgers, 45-6, 45 points in the first half for what may be the best offense in college football. It will be interesting to see this Buckeye offense with an improving C.J. Stroud against better defenses, top 20 defenses in the country at Penn State in particular, Michigan State and Michigan, of course. All right. The Maryland win was impressive as well, but the Terps were down a couple playmakers and had shown us the previous couple weeks, specifically against Iowa, losing by 37 points. Maryland, like Rutgers, not a good football team. A decent team, a capable team, a top 50 to 60 team in the country. Categorize Rutgers and Maryland in that place. Minnesota, more like a top 30 to 40 team in the country as it stands right now. So that's Ohio State's resume right now. They are rolling against marginal competition. But the final resume will look like this. Wins over likely top 25 teams. Purdue now included in that list. Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State, of course. Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State most likely will finish in the top 10 to 15 in the country this year. And when I mention top 10 to 15 rankings or top 25 rankings, what I am more looking for is the quality of win. That's why I also distinguish a Minnesota win top 30 to 40 in the country versus Maryland or Rutgers top 60 in the country, because that point should be distinguished and the difference between those opponents should be distinguished. Why people get caught up in this top 25 ranking? How many ranked teams did you defeat? Well, if a team is like the 30th best team in the country, we should give weight to that as well in comparison to everything else we do concerning the rankings. So Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Minnesota. That is going to be a solid resume for the Buckeyes in addition to a Big Ten championship win over fill in the blank. It looked to be Iowa a week ago. We shall see, but most likely another top 25, if not top 10 to 15 team in the country. All right, on to Oregon. The wins are weak, and also the performances. So not just the opposition poor, but the performances poor. It is so strange that Oregon put it all together in Columbus against the Buckeyes, because otherwise they have the best win in the country. They have the best out-of-conference win in the country right now, and it probably won't change. Otherwise, though, forget Stony Brook. Doesn't matter. Of course, Oregon lost to Stanford, a 3-4 team, a team that jumped up and beat USC and, of course, beat Oregon. But otherwise, Stanford, marginal team. Let's put them in the Rutgers, Maryland category. Maybe a little bit better. Maybe. Cal's a 1-5 football team. They play teams close, but they're still 1-5. Oregon barely escaped at home against Cal. Arizona is pathetic. 0-6 this season. 0-5 last season. They've lost, 17, 18 consecutive games now, something in that range. Oregon was struggling with them into the fourth quarter by 1 score. They pulled away late. Fresno State has proven to be a decent top 50, 60, 70 team in that range. Oregon struggled by Fresno State, beat them by 1 score. They are the anti-Nebraska. They beat everybody by 1 score instead of losing to everyone by 1 score. So the opponents are not impressive, nor is Oregon doing what Ohio State is doing and smashing their opponents. Ohio State winning by, goodness gracious, the last 2 weeks, 49 and 41 points. And the games weren't that close. All right. The rest of the resume for Oregon. We ran it down for the Buckeyes. At UCLA this week. UCLA, top 30 to 40 team in the country, something in the Minnesota range. UCLA right now at 5-2. They've lost to Fresno State and blown out in the second half by Arizona State. Also a game for Oregon at Utah. That's going to be tricky, but again, we've got to assume they win the Pac-12, may have to defeat Utah twice. Utah right now leads the Pac-12 South Division at 3-0. They've got a pretty substantial leg up, not just in the win-loss column, but the head-to-head with the win against Arizona State. So Colorado, Washington State, or Oregon State, those are bad football teams that Oregon's going to face down the stretch. It's all about winning at the Rose Bowl against UCLA and defeating Utah on the road, and most likely the Utes again. But keep in mind, this Utah team, they lost to BYU and San Diego State. So how good are they? Oregon is going to have roughly, maybe fringe top 25 to 30 wins. Ohio State is going to have this run of Penn State, Michigan State, Purdue. Okay, not even close. Potential top 25 wins. And again, I'm marking more quality than just looking at the ranked teams. 3 for Oregon. Ohio State more in that 4 really strong range. You could even tack on Nebraska. They would be one of the better teams Oregon would face, even though the Huskers are only 3-5. All right, let's get down to the game in Columbus. We cannot get past what actually happened on the field, because we can go through resumes and we can say this would happen, this would not happen. And a lot of people out there, including myself, believe Ohio State is better than Oregon and would win the game if they played again. But they actually did play. On top of that, they played in Columbus at the Horseshoe, where Ohio State had not lost since 2017. They don't lose games there. They were a 15-point favorite. No Kayvon Thibodeau for Oregon. Missing 5 key defensive players. Noah Sewell didn't play in that game for Oregon. I do not believe, or had limited time, was banged up. 5 key defensive players missing for Oregon. Kayvon Thibodeau, maybe the best defensive player in the country, out. And Oregon controlled the game. So there could be extremes given to this analysis of Oregon-Ohio State. 35-28 final. It did not go down to the wire. The Buckeyes get the ball with 10 seconds left, 20 seconds left at their own 5-yard line. They had no prayer of winning that game late. But with 4 to 5 minutes, they had the ball down by a touchdown. It was a 1-score game, and Ohio State had ample opportunity in the last 6, 7, 8 minutes of the game to win the game. So on that side of it, it was a close game. Ohio State outgained Oregon. So on that side of the ledger, close game. If you watched the game, Oregon physically controlled the game. Did not dominate the game by any stretch. Controlled the game. They had control of the game. They were constantly up by one possession, then 2 scores, then 1, then 2. They were never threatened in that way. So Oregon wins the game in Columbus 35-28. Should that not count? That means everything. The two teams played, and that's what I can't get past. Oregon hopped on a plane and went 3,000 miles across the country and played a football game. And if these two teams end the season conference champions and 12-1, is that not the reason? Why do we play the games? Ohio State's a more talented team. The star rankings tell us that. Why don't we just play this on Xbox or whatever you guys play these days? I don't even know. The college version of Madden. Why don't we just play it on there? And we don't have to, we can just watch the simulation of these games and declare our national champion. They play the game on the field for a reason. Oregon won the game. I cannot get past that. Believe me, though, I do understand the resume argument. I get it. It makes sense. I'm not saying, so there's a difference between me saying, you guys hear me on here a number of times when I say, your argument, your point, your system, whatever it is, does not make sense. That's not the case here. The head-to-head argument makes sense. Same record, conference champion, boom, head-to-head. We got a head-to-head. We rarely have head-to-head meetings that we can break ties on concerning the college football playoff. We should have had one, let's say in 2018, Ohio State, Oklahoma. 12-1, 12-1, conference champion. Well, Ohio State had the really bad loss, Purdue, 4 scores. But they had better wins than Oklahoma. But they did not play head-to-head. Here we've got a head-to-head, but we got a team with a really bad resume, and they're looking bad against a bad resume. So I get your point. If you're a resume person, and if you watch me on a regular basis, you know I'm a resume guy to the hilt. I talk resume all the time. I am a resume guy. I'm not an eyeball test guy. I've got eyes in my head, and I watch a ton of football, so I've got the eyeball test. And it's Ohio State. But I'm a resume guy because that's what you've done. That's why we're playing. The results, the performance on the field. I can't get past Oregon winning at Ohio State. They got a football team that got on a plane, traveled to enemy territory, won the game, controlled the game, won the game. Many of you will say, well, that was in week 2. You know what? That's a valid point if we want to select the 4 best teams at the end of the season. But one of those 4 best teams in any given season might be like a 9-3, 10-2 team that's hot at the end of the year. Do we put them in the playoff? All the games have to count, have to be weighted the same. We can't say, well, we're going to select the 4 best teams at the conclusion of the season, so that was way back in week 2. Well, if we want to do that, then we need to come up with a metric of weighting the games. Like the middle of the season, week 6, week 7, that counts for 1 game. But by the time we add on the weightiness of each game, the value, by the end of the season, those games count for 2. At the beginning of the season, those games count for like a fraction, like a 10th, a 5th of a game. So if you're going to go resume, the entire complete resume all counts the same. All right. My thoughts on Oregon, Ohio State. It's a great debate. It is the debate of 2021, in addition to Cincinnati versus the world. And we, of course, break it down right here at the Voice of College Football. Leave your comments down in the comment section below. Subscribe. Get us to 50,000 right here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you next time, which means Friday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, call-in show. Saturday, we'll be here all day. And, of course, instant analysis and the call-in show Saturday prime time right here at the Voice of College Football.